Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be going over a few things that I think are cooking a lot of your guys' Trackblazer or MANT runs. I've been seeing various different things from players. The scenario's been out for what, two weeks now, so there's been enough time to kind of have some people figure their way out throughout the scenario, as well as just like mess around with it and see what they can do. But on top of that, I've been seeing quite a few things from players that I think are minor, or in some cases a few major mistakes that people have been making that have been essentially ruining their runs. Just for a point of reference, I think for people who have their cards properly set up, so they're able to get 50 race bonus as a minimum, as well as focus on a handful of stats like wit and guts, for example, or if you're running like a standard deck, a 222, doing speed, stam, and wit. I think a lot of these players should be able to easily attain an SS and even a UG in a lot of cases, and I've seen mistakes that I think are kind of pointing people in the wrong direction. For new players, of course, this is going to be very different, and then there are the case of players that are not too new but still somewhat new, people who started around Christmas, who don't exactly have the full setup that they need. Of course, these things won't fully apply to you. This is mostly at regular players who've been playing for a minute and do have the cards that are set up for the game. That being said, this is coming from the perspective of someone who does have a very, very strong account, but also bear in mind that I am the same guy who's done S rank on free-to-play accounts, as well as have worked on helping out a lot of people within our Discord. So I do, mentioning the Discord, I do have a video here that we are looking at. I haven't played it yet. This is a full run from one of our Discord members who has been struggling to quite get there in terms of attaining like really high ranks through Trackblazer. And so today we're going to be taking a look at this run. I've already seen about 15 minutes of it myself, which is when I decided, oh, this would probably be really good to make a video on. And so today I'm going to essentially just watch through. We'll skip through a few things as well. I think there's some dead turns that probably don't need a whole lot of attention. But we'll get through this run, point out a few mistakes that some people probably are also making similar mistakes in, as well as give some advice for what can be improved throughout the run, as well as things to look out for that you just might not be aware of at first. That being said, this did come from one of our Discord members. Like I said, join the Discord. It's down in the description. As a side note, we are running a giveaway right now for the SSR selector ticket, the $20, it's like $21, that ticket. This is either for the UMA ticket or the card ticket. A lot of people are looking to get the card ticket, of course, because it will strengthen their account. But then there are some who maybe have the cards that they need but weren't able to get characters like Christmas Ogre Day or like New Year's Opera, for example. I think she's on there. Or like Saiyan Sky and stuff like that. So it is me and maybe Void who's running the giveaway, and it is in our Discord. The requirements are fully in there. We will be ending the giveaway on the 10th. And with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into the playthrough. Now we're going to probably skip a lot of the early things early on, and the sound on this playthrough is actually a little bit messed up, so I'm probably just going to overlay some music where I can. But from what we will see throughout this run, she will be running Tosin Jordan. As we can see here, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit because I think she takes a minute before she selects her parents. And right away is where my first note is actually immediately going to come into effect. Now, Tosin Jordan, if we go back a little bit, is a mile F Uma and a long B Uma. Now, the important thing about Trackblazer, as many of you know by this point, is that you are running a lot of races. But with that, we are racing with a purpose. We're not just simply racing to race or to get points for the shop. There are some secret sets, or epithets, of course, as many of us know them, that are very important towards running the career and can net you bonus stats, sometimes upwards as much as 300, depending on which sets that you run. More often than not, you'll be looking at getting a net gain of about 240 stats, assuming you're running the normal sets, and ending with, let's say, roughly 35 races as minimum. You should expect to get at least 240 extra stats, and those things will add up when it comes down to the end of your run. That is very much the difference between getting an S plus and an SS a lot of the time. That being said, we're going back into the parent selection. So looking here, we are seeing the use of 9-star blues, which, you know, typically is good. The fact that someone can have 9-star blues and be able to run them, I think, is really important. But looking around here, there are some different options that I'm seeing as well. So knowing that our Uma, Tosa and Jordan, has low aptitudes in, I would say, B long is somewhat consistent. There's not that many long races that you have to run, and by the point that you do run them in the career, you are at a spot where your stats are good enough to be able to take the long B, or you're in a spot where you can purchase skills. But Mile E is probably like the biggest thing that can be changed here. We see a Daiwa Scarlet that has a Mile Spark, which bringing up Mile from F, a single Mile Spark is not going to make like a huge difference. However, scrolling down, there's also a Suzuka that has a 3-star Mile. I personally would work on just combining Mile Sparks, as many as possible at the start of doing this scenario, in order to create 9-star Miles if you can, or having 2 parents that add up to 10 stars of Mile Sparks. You can't really get past doing 10 stars of Sparks. After that point, you do technically have to hit inspirations, but having Mile at C or B will be far more consistent and will open up your options compared to having it at F, E, or D. And we're going to see this in a moment here. So with the parents selected, I will just kind of skip ahead. Sorry, let me skip back for a second. This is essentially what ends up happening. It's stacking power sparks, which I think is perfectly fine in a lot of cases. As we can see, there is a style aptitude that is in here, which preferably you want to avoid style aptitudes if you can during MANT. This is because in careers, your style is not something that's actually factored in. It's only something that you will run after your career is done. For example, if you're doing team trials, you're not going to run someone who's NG as an end closer because it's going to significantly impact their stats. However, during a career, you can totally run somebody as an end closer. It's not going to affect your ability to run the race. It will, however, affect certain things like, for example, if you're unique, has certain conditions, such as Saiyan Sky's angling and scheming, you might not want to run her as an end closer during the career. However, there's a few specific scenarios where you might want to do that. Say you're way too low on stam and you need to run the Kika Show, for example. That would be like a good example. Should be rare that Uma has stam growth, but if something like that were to happen, yes, you could technically run her end. She might not have a unique, but it shouldn't hamper her anything past that. Like, so in this case, ideally focusing on having a single long spark would be good, as well as just stacking the rest on Mile Sparks. Now, this is what for one specific Uma, and building parents for a specific Uma takes a very, very long time to do. I should know, I've spent thousands of hours doing it myself. It's not a very fun thing to do. So if you can build generic Umas that have distance aptitudes and try and get things that will bring up most of your Umas, that would be ideal. Many Umas are Mile C or D with medium A and long A. So it's not something that's like necessarily too hard to do. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So I will acknowledge that. So moving on past the parent selection, we're going to take a look at the card selection. Now, personally here, there's nothing that really stands out. Obviously, we're going to use cards like NTR, we'll use Fuku, and we'll use cards like Kita-san, especially in this case where we have a player who she's not free to play, right? But she's not having the strongest account. For example, it's not an MLB Creek, which has the most amount of race bonus that can have. It's not an MLB Marvelous Sunday, which is honestly, in my opinion, this is actually something that should be swapped out. And then we don't have like things like Nice Nature or Fine Motion here. We're just kind of running with what someone might have had they planned for a couple specific banners. If they were playing early and they planned for Kita-san just to get a couple copies and then Crystal and Ticket later on the half Annie, or pull the banner after the half Annie and then focusing on pulling Creek as well, This is something that's not that uncommon. I've seen many players that have a very similar situation to where they have Kitasan MLB'd, they might have a few copies of Creek, and then they have their SRs. This is totally normal. I feel like this is a pretty normal deck for the most part. Personally, the one thing that I would do here is just double checking the race bonuses here to just make sure that we're at 50. In this case, I think we are slightly under. I'm just calculating numbers in my head, but I don't think Creek is at her full race bonus of 10 at 3LB, and I think the same thing for Sunday. Something like Sunday Power could help balance this out a little bit in replacing Creek. So that is also technically an option. And then I think she's going to check the race bonus here. So if we pause for a second, looking at the race bonus, yeah, so we have 16 plus 5. That's going to be what, 21? And then 30. So it is meeting 50. Okay, I didn't know that they had 8. I thought it was 5. So that works out really well. And so if she's going to run this deck, which I think she's going to, just kind of taking a moment to think. Yeah. In this case, 50 race bonus, perfectly fine. We don't need to see the intro here, so we are going to skip. Now, this is something that I've spoken about in many of the runs that I've done in the past as well, like just showing the careers that I've done on Unity, URA, a lot of the stuff. If I'm commentating it and it's one of the challenges that I've done, I think I've mentioned it as well. But the very first thing that you want to do in this scenario, very much like any of the other scenarios that you will play, and this is pretty much all of them with the exception of a handful of scenarios that are coming out, is you want to raise your friendships up like immediately, taking the stacks that you can, no matter what stat that they are on, for the most part. There's a big asterisk there. Is ideal. That way that you can raise the friendships and start getting your rainbows quicker. Now in MANT, there is the option to have the grilled carrots. The barbecue is good. It's not something you should rely on. It's not something that drops very often. Many runs can get it early on, right? You can get 1 or 2, but most of the time you're not going to get enough to make up for what you decide to do in your early training. If you decide not to train with your team members very early on, you will more than likely not get enough carrots, if any at all, in order to raise your friendships to the point where they can rainbow. Knowing this and knowing that you essentially only have 11 turns at the start before they make debut, and then 3 turns after that on average, you should just try and raise your friendships as much as possible. And I'm going to talk about the number of turns that you actually have available to you in a moment. For now, we're just going to watch what happens here. So she's checking all the trainings. That's really, really important. I think here, yes, I would say that that is pretty much the correct move. That's what I would go for. If not, I would either raise my mood just to get more out of my training in a situation like that, because it's just kind of singles, but having a hint also increases the friendship. I would take the speed here. That's just like the option to take considering how low the speed is. And we are just going to watch as she does a few of these training turns. Overall, I think there's nothing to really comment on here for what she's doing. It is, like I said, just the ideal thing to do is that you train on your stacks of training where you have your cards together. On top of that, once you have situations where, like what just happened, there's 2 cards on one, 2 cards on another, that's when you decide, oh, my power is kind of high. I'm going to opt for training my stamp. Now, she did click the extra training option there. Not something that I personally would do considering how much we typically race in this scenario. You don't really need Akikawa friendship, nor do you need the extra like 5 stats that you get off of that. It's not going to be much of a deal breaker a lot of the time, but we will take note of what's going to happen next, and this can explain why that decision was made. So she's going to do the rest of her training. I think I'm not going to skip ahead, but we will speed it up a little bit. So just kind of watching here. So we're seeing her do the stack training. She is rested once already, so take note of that. This is something where you can end up cooking your runs really, really early if you rest too much. because you need your early stats in order to gain consistency. So let's see what happens here. I guess technically, let's see. So checking all of these, is she gonna gamble that? It's a 16% versus a 0. There is a hint, and it is a 3 stack technically. 16% is low enough. Looks like she's really debating it here. I personally wouldn't gamble this so early on, but high risk, high reward. So focus hint plus that. However, now the energy is too low, but this can be fixed, and it looks like it will be. Okay, so it looks like she only really rested that one time. If I were her here, I would take the wit, and she does. And so this turn, once you race, will take up your energy. This option doesn't really matter, in my opinion. I've chosen the straightaway adept option a number of times, but really only in a situation where my energy is already kind of high enough and my mood is already maxed. Oftentimes you're gambling essentially a 50-50 on that straightaway adept hint. The skill itself is like somewhat expensive, so getting the single hint's not going to make you buy it. However, if you get the 3 hints and you have something like Fast Learner, it could just be an extra buy in order to help you out a little bit. We are going to skip ahead here. Jordan wins that. I want to see this. Okay. Top option. That is the one that you can control the most. It is the one that'll lead you to not having really, really low energy a lot of the time, I think. More often than not, people will lose to the 10. The only time you should ever gamble the bottom option on completing your races on the race victory screen is either if you are going to be at 0 anyway. So this means, like, for example, if I have 17 energy left, and sometimes you just kind of know like a rough idea of like, okay, I don't have more than 20, right? If I have less than 20 but more than 10, so that means like somewhere between like here where this line is and like here, right? If my energy falls somewhere around this range, I might take the bottom option just so that I can gamble the 10, because if I take the 20, I'll be at 0 anyway. If it hits the 30, is it 35? I think it's 25, or maybe it's 30. It'll be at 0 anyway, right? So if it hits the 10, you'll have enough energy to race again more often than not, or in some cases take wit. It really depends on the situation. But that is the only time that you should ever actually take the bottom option. In most cases, taking the 20 is just the better option to do. You could easily control that, and if you're counting your energy properly and knowing which turns you need to race on, which we will get into in a second, I promise, I swear, then it makes it very, very easy to manage your energy throughout the scenario to where you're not having to take riskier options. The more control that you have over the scenario, the more control you have over the outcome of the scenario. And this means, okay, if I'm aiming for a specific stat line, for example, you want to control as many of those elements as you possibly can. This is where shop purchases come into mind. This is where proper energy management comes into mind, as well as just knowing your race sets. All of that we will get into as this career continues. And hopefully we can sort of point out and maybe fix a few things that other people have also been making, which I would consider to be mistakes. Anyway, continuing with the run. She fixed the skill here. Perfectly fine. The mood's already maxed. You might as well just take the skill. We have 12 turns. Is she going to open the agenda? Otherwise, I'm going to have to count turns manually. I swear she opens the agenda to plan races. So I think this should be like good. So this is exactly what I was talking about. This is a rare shop. 2 grilled carrots and then like some notepads and whatever, all the other stuff. This is somewhat of a rare shop. You're lucky to get 1 of these on your first shop. You're not even guaranteed to get 1. So if you get 1, you're lucky. You get 2, you might as well start just like bowing down to side games. They love you. In this case, what do I buy from this shop? Personally, I would buy the grilled carrots first, and then I'd buy the speed manual and then just call it a day. We can come back for the hammer. Hammers are essentially must buys, but I think at a certain point in the career. I would buy the hammer on the latter half of the 6 turns. She didn't buy the speed manual there. I still think that it is a good purchase because you might as well just bolster your stats now. And then she's put in a situation where she has to rest immediately. I don't think, let's go back here. She did check the wit. Now, there were no energy items in the shop, so I do understand not taking anything here. It almost makes sense. And I think that it's not a terrible move. I think it's perfectly fine. However, considering that we have someone who was willing to gamble a 16% earlier, this is something where it's a little bit surprising in my opinion. What I personally would do here is actually just click the wit anyway. Compared to resting, and she got a sleep deprived. However, you can't just know that ahead of time, right? We're not going to know that. It's all RNG. Compared to getting something like a sleep deprived, getting a well rested would be great. That would be perfect. You know, that is the best case scenario. However, the situation we have here is you have 2 options. You either bump your stats up by 9, so you get a little more speed, you get a little more wit, and you get 3 skill points. Now there's nobody on the wit. She didn't really check any of the other trainings either. So I would have just taken the wit just to see if maybe on the next turn, it's possible to have like another wit training. And that will give you enough energy to where, one, your speed will increase, right? But also it'll put you at enough energy by that point once you've done 2 wit clicks to where you could probably just take a normal training. So let's see what is available here. Now there's somebody on wit. So, and then there's nobody on anything else. So taking the wit technically wouldn't have been a bad move earlier compared to resting. And then right here, technically in most cases should be your last training turn. Now, as we took note at the start, Miles Sparks were not brought. So this means that the Niigata Junior Stakes is not something that is going to be ran. Now, this brings me to a very important point. Now, I think she's going to train, but knowing that those stakes aren't going to be ran, but also knowing what else was in the shop. If we go back just a little bit, right, to where the shop was there, we know that there was a cleat hammer and a motivating megaphone, and then this speed manual was never bought. Now that speed manual can have her in a spot where it could be a little bit better for her speed, which is kind of low. Getting an extra 7 isn't something that's going to make a huge difference at the start. However, these things do add up. So she could have been at 200 speed by this point, as well as earlier when she took the wit, which might have made it more appealing to take things like wit. This is just something where it's like, oh, if you know you have a little bit of extra points, you probably should just spend it there. And so by this point here is typically where you do your 2 races. You'll take 2 junior stakes races on these turns on late August late August and then early September. Both of those are mile races, the Niigata Junior Stakes, as well as, I don't remember what the other one's called, but I know that there's 2 junior stakes on the early September turn. One's a sprint, one's a mile. If you have Miles Sparks, it makes it easy to take those. And the reason I'm mentioning these junior stakes races is because they're technically part of a set. It's part of an early game set, which will net you an extra like 10 stats by the time that you complete the 3rd stakes race. You should just click forge your own path there. So she's scheduling races. Personally, on this scenario, I prefer to keep the agenda up. It's actually something that we've had for a minute on Global, but it's not something that existed on the other servers because it came out with MANT. So that being said, there wasn't really a Steam version, so that button was just like locked, right? It was just locked for the longest time on Global. Other servers didn't have that problem because the game just released on mobile. It wasn't really a Steam version. So we didn't have like a full UI like we do here. So like I was saying earlier, technically you would have 3 turns to train here if you have Miles Sparks, and then you race on this turn, and then you race on this turn with a 1 turn break in between. These races can also reset your shop, and they can also give you more points to spend on things in your shop, knowing that we have the hammer and the megaphone, for example. Just keeping track of those items. You want to keep a mental track of these things because it will affect how your run turns out. These are those controllable elements I was talking about. If you know that you have something in the shop that can flip the run, you should put yourself in a position to where you can get the item from the shop. That being said, sometimes there's shop resets that throw off the course of your plans. However, you should still try and think ahead in those situations to where, okay, you know that you needed to buy 50, or like in this case, what is it, 55 plus 25, so 80 worth of stuff from the shop, and you had an extra 15 that could be available for the speed manual. So knowing that you need an extra 80, you run the extra race here. If you get a shop reset, you check what those items are, and then you run the race again in order to get more money. Shops will reset every 6 turns. So on the late September turn, once that is completed, the shop will reset. So on that turn specifically, typically what happens is you either rest or train that turn. So you have your 2 races here, and I'm just kind of showing this on like a blurry background, but you have your 2 races here, you rest, you do another 2 races, you rest. I say rest, but it's just, you have an open turn to train, rest, do whatever you need. And then you'll run your 3 races end of the year. Now, junior stakes, like I was saying, very important part of a set. The other race that is important to do junior year, there's actually technically 2, is the Saudi Arabia, the early October mile race. And then on early December, if you're running the Tiara route, you have to do the Hanshin JF. It's not much of a choice. You need to run that race. For those running the classic route, technically the Asahi High isn't like a mandatory race from what I've seen. It's an either or. You can take it or you can just not. But also, I mean, like if you lose that race, it doesn't really hurt you too bad. So looking at this, right, we have hit the early October. So we've passed late September here. And this is why you want to bring Mile Sparks, like I was saying. You want to be able to, 1, run that set. 2, you need to be able to race those turns because now the shop has reset and you have no money. And when the shop resets and you have no money, you know what this is. It's essentially throwing the run. There are stat items here. There is hand cream here. None of it can be bought. There's energy item, speed ankle weight, things that are good considering that there's speed cards in here. There's the grilled carrots, but none of it can be purchased. So what's left to do is to train. And now if you think about it in this regard as well, sorry, I know I keep pausing. If you think about it in this regard, right? If you run those extra races, sure, you lose training turns, right? In air quotes, you lose training turns and you're going to lose energy. However, where it's made up is in a turn that you have available to you in order to train. You have things to, 1, bump up your energy. 2, you can use things like megaphones and weights in order to further turn the training into something stronger. It's no good to take random trainings that are like, for example, like this, a 13 and a 6, so 19 total stats. If you include the skill points, you're looking at 21. It's no good to take something like this 2 or 3 turns in a row, right? Compared to getting something like being able to stack your megaphones, your energy items, as well as getting hammers, because those things will add up to almost the same thing, if not better a lot of the time, and you'll get more skill points for racing. And the skill points will be some of the most important things that you will see as Uma continues. Skill points are such an important thing. I'd say it's probably far more outweighed than stats past a certain point. I've never seen this message before. This is the first time I've seen that. But yes, you want to be able to race. And this is something that is also technically part of the gameplay loop. Playing MANT is like playing FNAF. You want to do the same things almost every turn until you're fully familiar with the scenario, which is you want to check your training, you want to check your shop, see which items you need in the shop, check your money, and then you want to check your races. Now, in this case, like I said, we know we can't take mile races, and that really does limit things a lot. However, even taking open races would be a better alternative in order to have some money and to have some points done. Open races aren't inherently valuable on their own. However, it leaves you in a spot where you have money at least, because you'll still get your 100 shop points. And you'll get your 20 points towards your goal. You won't get a rival race. And honestly, the stat gain for the energy loss kind of sucks, since it's an open, or even in this case like a pre-open, and you'll see this in practice. But if we go all the way back, we take 20 steps back all the way down to the parents for the scenario, right? if we have mile C or even mile B, mile C is like a little rough to work with. If we have mile B, so let's move the goalposts. Let's move the goalposts. If we have mile B, it puts us in a spot where a lot more can happen. Like the potentials open up so much more. I would say the stats would be looking somewhere close to like 300 speed, 300 power, 300 wit, maybe even 300 stam by this point, considering that some strong cards are actually being used here. It would lead to far more consistent wins throughout the rest of the career because the stat line has already broken through a certain threshold. And then on top of that, you also be able to get your other things from the shop because you're able to race. And I think that that is a key and crucial part, is understanding that one, you need your aptitudes. So if you're going to run your specific sets, you need your aptitudes for mile, medium, long, for example. If you're going to do classic route, if you're going tiara route, you're going to need mile, medium, long again, right? That's another important one. However, you can get away with long C on tiara. And then if you're doing something that's like sprint, you're going to need, of course, sprint A, mile A, medium A. You actually don't need long for sprint. Some sprinters are insanely hard to get their long aptitude up, and also something like their medium or their mile, depending on the sprinter. It's pretty hard. It can be pretty inconsistent. So I do relate with that. And then for dirt Umas, you typically want to do like something like the tiara route, or depending on the Uma, you might just go the classic route anyway. So El Condor Pasa can do the classic route. I think with digital, I did the classics. No, I did the tiara, but I still ran the Arima. Reason being is because I was able to get digital's long aptitude to C without much trouble. And then Arima is at a point where long C is not much of a hassle because you're able to easily comp that with skills. So let's take a look at the purchasing here. So something that I would say, just as a note, this is not necessarily a good purchase. It's like a last resort purchase. Now in this case, considering that we are on our, what is this? That's 4 races, including the debut by this point. You might want this in that case. If you're not racing a ton, which I will say you should be, you might want to buy that. The carrots I think are good here. That megaphone is bad, but we also know that there are stats that are higher up. If I recall, it should be a power scroll. I would have just bought that personally. It's always good to just have more stats. She didn't seem to check the full shop, right? Yeah, wait. So the shop opens up. Let's see here. She just immediately scrolls past it. I guess, I don't know if she forgot about it, but that power scroll is like pretty good. You always want to buy scrolls. You always want to buy manuals, and you always want to buy energy items. Those are essentially must buys, along with hammers. Like cleat hammers are also essentially must buys. You have to buy those. You don't really have much of a choice. You need to be able to buy those items. They will flip your run from being something kind of mid into something that could be amazing. And that is just the truth there. Is she going back for that? I would buy that like right now. Yeah. There we go. And then technically this turn, you typically want to race on that early December turn because you will go unpunished for your 3rd race on the Hopeful 6. Not everybody knows that, but it is important. And then you always want to run the Hopeful Stakes anyway because it is your final race of the year. A lot of the time, it'll be the race that gets you probably the most stats if you're not running like the mile races, although you should be, as we said. You might not win the mile races early in the year, so you should try and win the Hopeful at the very least. I also personally try not to burn too many clocks in junior year, maybe like 1 or 2 at most, because you're going to need the rest of them for the rest of the run. That is a win. The Hopeful Stakes is not necessarily a tough race, although it can be a very inconsistent race. That is the best way I can describe it. It's not necessarily hard, but it can just be a race where your Uma just fucking poops your pants. I don't know. It has a tendency to just blow up. Like there's no other way to explain it. Now, moving on into the rest of this year, technically she should be running the classic route here. Now, I don't think she's going to pre-schedule for races the way that she probably should. She's going to buy the items in the shop. Now, we talked about this earlier. Energy items and stats are a must buy. The megaphone is not really like that important in this scenario, or in this specific case. I need to stop saying scenario. I'm talking about scenario like this situation right here, right? Not Trackblazer. The megaphone is important in Trackblazer. But in this specific case, I wouldn't say that it is the most important purchase there. Now, she's scheduling the races here, and we will see at the end of this essentially how it turns out. Now, immediately, there's an issue here. There is an immediate issue here. There's actually two immediate issues here. Now, you can technically skip these 4 turns of racing. You don't have to race on these 4 turns. It's not a must. You can actually skip them a lot of the time. It's not terrible to do that. It's not the greatest either. I would probably try and race on the early February turn. 1, for a shop reset. Also, 2, you typically don't have that many points by this point. So you might want some more money in order to get certain items in the shop. There is the Kyoto News High, and then there is also a Tokyo Turf race somewhere there. It's like a 1600 meter mile. There's options. There's G3s here that are decent to take. Both of the miles, or both of the races, I think are miles. The G3s that I'm thinking of, so that would require mile sparks. And I'll keep mentioning mile races, but just bear in mind, I'm not going to keep saying it, but mile sparks are needed, right? Mile sparks are needed. Probably the most important spark in this entire scenario is a mile spark. I think that'll be the last time I mention it. Most Umas are mile C, so you need mile sparks. You'll need at least 4. Make parents with those sparks. Okay. That being said, all of that out the way. In this case, there is a bigger issue, a bigger, more glaring issue that I think needs to be talked about. And this is moving on to a very, very, very important point that I think a lot of people will easily miss. And that is the fact that you have to know your race sets. Know your sets. Know that if you're going to run the classic races, if you're going to do the Satsuki show and the Japanese Derby, that on the late October turn, you cannot take the Tenno show autumn. You have to take the Kika show. You have no choice. It is because you need to get the epithet for the classic Triple Crown, right? You must race the Kika show. You have to do it. There is no choice there. When you complete the set for the classic Triple Crown, you will get your bonus stats. You will get one for, I think, every crown that you take along the way. So I do believe that you get like 10 for completing the Derby after you've won the Satsuki show. You complete the Japanese Derby and you should get like 10 stats. I think in like 2 potentially. I actually don't know 100% on this because I typically also race the turn here. So don't quote me on that. You might want to check that. But you have to run these. So you run this, you run that, and then you run the Kika show here, not the Tenno show. Takarazuka Kinen is perfectly fine. This is a coin flip race. You can choose to run it or not, or you can choose to race for 4 turns here. I would not run the Aoba show because typically you'll run your miles here. So an important schedule to remember is that if you are going to do the classic route and you have gotten your mile sparks, the important thing to remember here is that you will train or rest these 2 turns, right? Early Jan, late Jan. There's nothing here. You will train these 2 turns. This will be different in senior year. We have a little bit of a visual glitch here where it's still highlighting junior, but this is classic year. There's nothing that's happening on these turns. In senior year, it's a little bit different, but we'll get to that. So you will train these 2 turns. 3rd turn, depending on how your shop is looking, and this is why we check our training, we check our shop, we check our money, we see how much money you have, we see what items are in the shop if you want them. If you want them and you have no money, or it's going to put you at low money, like really low money, you race. You will run the, what is it? I think it's the Kyoto, yeah, Kyoto News High. And then Tokyo something. I don't remember. I don't know if it's the Shimbun or what. So potentially race this turn, early February. Late February, there's no races. Early March, there's races. You can race this turn, or you could choose not to race this turn. If you have Mile Sparks, you can race on late March and you take the Spring Stakes into the Satsuki Show. Doesn't really matter. So remember, this turn, race. This turn, it's up to you. This turn, also up to you, depending. You have to race one of these turns. You don't really have a choice here either. You need the stats, you need the money, more often than not. Unless the training's like really, really good, which this early in the game, it's not going to be. You have to race one of these turns. You can race both, actually. You can race all three right here. You have to take the Satsuki Show. If you don't take this, you're taking the Tiara route, and you have to take the, which one's there? Can't remember. The pink one. Take the pink one. I can't remember the name right now. Late April, you typically don't race. You'll run early May, and you will take your NHK Mile Cup. And then you'll go into the Japanese Derby. Completing these two will give you the Divergent Double Crown, which will give you extra stats. And then on this turn, you can take the Yasuda Kinen if you have the items, in my opinion, that will prevent race fatigue. So that means upping your energy, as well as having skin cream on hand as a backup, and maybe even a cupcake. You don't need to use those if it pops this turn. If you race 3 turns and you pop the condition, wait. Because if you race on the 4th turn for the Takarazuka Kinen, you might as well just save your items, because you can end up just fucking it up again. If you're on 0 energy, you're fucked, right? Or if you pop the items here and then you decide to race again anyway, you're fucked. Early June, you can save this. If you decide to run 4 in a row and you get punished for it, you can save this turn in, or early July. Sorry, not early June. Early July, you can save this turn to rest. Typically, you want to double Megaphone. So the 2 turns, 60% on these 2 turns, and then on these 2 turns, and then full train throughout the summer, because it's your level 5 training. So if you skip this turn, you should be just fine to do that. But if you run all 4 here, then this is probably a rest turn, more likely than not. And that's okay. You can also race during the summer. That's perfectly fine. It's not terrible. Level 5 training is good, but sometimes RNG bites you in the ass and you don't get good level 5 training, and you just have to take what you got. It's the unfortunate truth. It does happen. Nobody is exempt from that, no matter how much money you spend on the game. So that being said, know your sets, right? So Triple Crown, this needs to be Kikasho. Divergent Double Crown, NHK Mile Cup here, right? Once you complete the NHK Mile and you do this, we will flip down to the bottom here. So we know we need the Kikasho here, but you also need to take the Mile Championship on this turn instead of the Japan Cup. That's very important, because it will start to give you the epithet for completing the miles. You want to have that. Queen Elizabeth Cup here is actually not needed. It's a G1. It is good. It's good to take a G1. However, 5 turns of racing, not good to take. I would either skip one of these 2 races in order to take this race, and I would only take this race if my training is bad. If my training is bad, I will take the Queen Elizabeth. A lot of the time, people will say if the training before weights and megaphones is 70, right, then you take a G1 if it's a G1 that turn. However, this is not going to count towards one of your epithets, so it's weighted a little bit differently in that regard. You don't technically have to take this. You will not get any bonuses for taking this. So it's an optional race. This is an optional race. Now, the skill points alone can be really, really good, right? That can be worth it on its own. It just really depends on your training and where things are at. Now, in this case, this is one of the only races that can be taken, because the mile G1s are not an option. So taking an extra G1 here is perfectly fine. However, ideally, we take the steps to prevent this from happening. So what does my ideal schedule look like? Ideally, race early February I'll race early March. I might race late March, and I'll race early April. I will rest or train on late April. I will try and race on early May. It's essentially a mandatory race because it only exists during the classic year for the NHK. I will take the Derby, and then I will gauge whether or not I'm going to take the race here. More often than not, I will actually put this off for senior year because you can actually just complete it senior year for the Yasuda Kinen and be just fine. Then I will take Takarazuka, and then I will train through the summer. Early September, I am taking I believe it's the Niigata Kinen. So it is a medium race. I will take that. And then I will decide on late September if I'm going to take the all-comers. If I'm running NTR, a lot of the time I will end up taking the all-comers because it gives you decent fans. However, if I'm already at the 200K, I'm not taking this race and I'm not racing this turn. Instead, I will take the Umamusume Stakes on the early October turn, and then Kikasho on the late October turn. Cannot take the Tenosho. This is going to be Autumn Triple Crown, right? But you're better off getting the classic and then doing the extra epithet that you get for completing the classic and also completing or winning the Arima Kinen that year. You actually get bonus stats for doing these 4 races. So, or not this one, but the Kikasho, right? So Triple Crown plus Arima Kinen is a bonus. So Kikasho. Then this turn, I will typically just rest or train. I will do Mile Championship. I will take a G2 or a G3 here on early December, and then we run Arima. That being said, that is my typical schedule. This is essentially just running what we can run here in this specific situation. So knowing these couple things, right? You need to know your sets. You need to have your epithets up. And then you need to know which items are must buys in your shop, which items have value. Hammers always have value. Stat items always have value, right? Energy items always have value. Those are your big 3. Aside from that, megaphones, the 60% takes priority over the 40%. And the 20% just really isn't worth it in a lot of situations. However, if you have nothing else, it's probably okay to buy it. For weights, if you're doing a guts deck, which is probably the cheapest way to do things, guts weights are all you need a lot of the time. For the standard 222 comp, you're going to need to buy speed and stam weights, maybe even occasionally power weights, depending on if you brought a power card or not. And if you need more power, sometimes you just got to click that power and it sucks, but sometimes you do. It's a little bit of a waste of a click a lot of the time. And that would be what I would say are like kind of the core concepts here for this scenario and the things that will shift how a lot of people play and view the scenario. Now, we will continue through it. There is something that I'm kind of looking for, and we can speed this up again here in order to get an idea of what we're looking at. She's taking a lot of time deliberating and like pausing, so it's a little bit slower than the run technically should take. She decides to gamble and go for Akikawa there. I think that is an option. You will always get your energy back before the early March turn starts. That is something worth noting. Now she does lose this. What does she decide to do? I would clock this, but she decides to just push it through anyway. I would only clock this in the condition that I believe wholeheartedly that I can win. Sometimes you have flukes where somebody else wins and maybe they shouldn't have. That does happen. Okay, taking the wit there at a 29%. It's actually fine. What the hell? Why did we not skip that? Okay. So, Satsuki 1. So this is good. 1 crown has been attained. I don't know why she's taking so long on some things. And then this is the Alba. Now she has some money. She's buying items from the shop. The stat line here actually technically isn't bad. It's not terrible. I'd say that's roughly where I would expect it to be by this point is somewhere around like 300s and a couple stats, maybe 400s. This is almost essentially 300 itself. It's not terrible. It is behind, right? There's a difference. It's not terrible, but it is behind. This is not the stats that I would want to have here. I'd want to be nearing 500 on like my main 3 stats if I wanted. So that means like wit, speed, stamp. Those are the cards I brought. I want those cards to work. I don't know why we went to poo-poo quality. But that's what I would ideally want to have. So let's take a minute. This is going to buffer, but in that regard, I will speak on this. There are stat lines that I think are kind of checkpoints for how your run is doing, and you can kind of assess where you are in the run based on those stat lines. It's not very easy to gauge at first, but I think with tons of experience, it becomes very easy to understand. Oh, okay, my stats should be at this point, by this point, right? Otherwise, I should throw out the run. In this case, I would have thrown out the run personally, but that's all right. Okay, she wins the derby, and then she seems to win that's the mermaid stakes. Where's the Takadozuka Kinen? I may have skipped too far. Oh, did she decide to race this turn? It's bold. 3 turns, because surely she doesn't skip a G1. See, and this is why too, I'm gonna repeat this, but you want to be able to run as many races as you can, because look at this shop, like it's so cooked low-key. She is put in a spot where she needs to spend all of her money. Well, that's not terrible, spending all your money if it's on like good stuff, but she's not gonna have anything like leading into summer. She'll have 145 points, assuming she wins the next race, but I think it should be easy. Yeah. So 145 going into the next thing. We know that there's not very many energy items that have been purchased, for example. So this kind of leaves her in a tricky spot to where there's not very many energy items that seem to have dropped either. There are stam weights. They're always good. So yeah, this just goes back to just understanding the sets. Now, this is the situation where you want to have 2 of the double megaphones, and in this case, this is where that turn can be reserved for resting. However, she did buy an energy item, so let's see if she remembers that. Also, you have a megaphone. Should always megaphone during the summer. There we go. There's 2, and then there's energy items. Where's the megaphone? You megaphone that. You always megaphone that. This is just good summer practices. Always use your megaphone. It is essentially the only time that you'll have level 5 training in your entire career on this. You always megaphone that. It doesn't matter if it's not on the stat that you want. So now we have a bunch of megaphones that we're not going to get to use because we know that races are coming up. And I understand not using the 2 megaphone, knowing that, oh, you know, I'm going to have 2 turns of summer here, right? That almost makes sense, but also there's an open turn here. So using the 2 and then another 2 is perfectly fine, even if you don't have level 5 training for that last turn. And I can understand too if she's sitting here like, oh, this is why I didn't want to use the megaphone, because there's nothing on this turn. However, there isn't nothing here. That wit training is not terrible. And I think, does she still have energy items? I can't fully remember. I think there is. Let's check. So before that was used, yeah, there's a 20 energy at the top. And a good luck charm. Wait. So what is she going to do on this next turn? I think that ideally I just click speed again, personally. But she chooses to race. Okay, that is, in my opinion, a bad decision. Just understanding that the stats are behind, knowing that you have items that can help you train, I personally think that that is somewhat of a bad decision. Yeah, I can't explain it any other way other than that was probably not the best decision to make there. Aside from not megaphoning like a turn earlier as well. Because then you could have just chosen not to megaphone this turn, and that would have been perfectly fine too, technically speaking. So then we go back into the rest of this, and I don't feel like I need to see too much more. I think she's just going to race on the races that she has scheduled, I believe. Although that's not what I'm seeing when I'm scrubbing through. Does she race here? She does race there. I saw swimming a second ago. So, wait, did she choose to train this turn? Okay, so she's buying items. Okay, remember the practices. So, I wouldn't megaphone here. See, this is why you want to have used that during the summer. It would have been better. This is good training, I will say. It's enough to skip a G3. Although the it's a G2. But I would have taken like the Umamusume stakes that turn. That way I can also get that epithet as part of the senior set. But we'll talk about that in a second. I don't feel like I need to see more of Classic here. She didn't race the 5 turns in a row. So she ran the Tenno Autumn. And so something worth noting is she runs the Tenno Autumn here. It's race fatigue, by the way. Racing on 0. But something important here is she gets a hint. And then she gets a bonus. However, this is not your triple crown bonus. And you'd rather take the triple crown. You'll get just a higher bonus. Especially after you do the Arima. So she loses that. Does she clock? She does clock. And then she wins. So I'm going to start speeding up here because we're already hitting an hour. It's just sitting on the screen. And then another race. We're still racing on 0. So this is probably going to result in skin outbreak. You don't really want to race on 0 on this scenario. So let's see what happens here. She got reporter. There you go, skin outbreak. So that is predictable. I will say that. Some people think it's random. That is predictable. So if you run 3 races, and this can be found on Uma Guide. Speaking of which, I might link that in the description. I think it's a really good site. You can actually check your epithets, check which races you need to do. I think there's also a planner, so you can do your schedule. But if you check Uma Guide, I believe it's on there too, on the scenario specifics, like the details and whatnot. For the guide for the scenario, it does explain race fatigue mechanics. So if you race on 0, you have a chance of triggering race fatigue. This chance will compound the more turns you race consecutively on 0. On top of the fact that you also have a chance of getting it once you race 3 turns. So racing on 0 twice triggered it now twice. So racing late October on 0, early November on 0, and now late November on 0. Actually, I don't know if early November was 0. I didn't check. But late November on 0. By the time you're on your 3rd race and you're racing on 0, you can expect to get skin outbreak. It is it's a pretty solid chance. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. You can check it on the guide, but you have a pretty solid chance of getting that. Anyway, this turn, typically you would want to race that turn, in my opinion, simply because you'll go unpunished for your 3 turns, even if you have 0 energy racing on the late December turn. So she wins that. Does she get Horse Girl of the Year? Or best, what is it? Best classic Umamusume? Oh, like stuttered. Surely she gets it. It's not that hard to get, but yeah, there you go. So unique level up, and then we have shop. So let's see if she schedules races this year. You cannot really race this turn typically, however, it is possible right now. So she is going to schedule races, and we see the race schedule. This is way too light. I'm gonna say this right now. This is way too light. I think by the end of this, what are we looking at? Maybe like 28, maybe like 28 races, something like that. Maybe it's in the 20s. It's in the 20s, I believe, and we'll see the end of this. But I believe this is in roughly like the 20s for races. Remember, you don't have to take Queen Elizabeth both years if you're doing classic route. What I would fill these races in with is, in this situation, Umamusume Stakes races would be great. So there's actually one that you could take early March, and then there's one that you could take early October. You can also take this classic year, and that's how you get the 3 for that bonus. There is also a turn on late January that you should race more often than not if you're able to take your junior year miles. That means that you've taken the Saudi Arabia that it occurs on early October in junior year. That means that you are primed for the country named races set. I don't know what it's called on Global. I've never actually checked it. I just know that the set exists. But you can race late January to get the American JCC. And then you can race early February. There should be like a medium race that is available that turn. Take a break late February, unless you're running dirt. You can also race that turn, in which case I would skip this turn. And then you can race the Umamusume Stakes in early March. And then Osaka High, take a break turn, Tenno Spring, Victoria Mile, take a break turn, Yasuda Kinen, Takarazuka Kinen. And that would net you a lot higher stats because of the race bonus, shop resets, and then more money. So you'd have a lot more available here. And it also pushed you closer to being at like 30 races. This is assuming mile sparks, of course. Then we have summer, and then you can take the Niigata Kinen again, skip late September, Umamusume Stakes, complete the set, so 3. So you do the classic one that turn as well, like I had mentioned earlier, and then now you do the Tenno Spring Japan Cup. This will complete the country races set. You can race this turn, and then this will complete the senior autumn triple crown. By the time that you follow, like if you were to follow the set that I laid out, so everything I mentioned junior year, so it'd be the 2 races on these turns junior year, or sorry, this turn and this turn junior year, then these 2 turns, and then the 3, right? And then classic year, you do your classic triple crown. You have your 1 race that's on this turn, your 2 to 3 that are here, your 2 here, Takarazuka Kinen, 1 here, 2 here, 3 here, right? And then you do what I just laid out in classic or in senior year. So 2 here, 2 here, 1, 2 here, 2 here, train, 1 here, 2 here, 3 here. By the time you end the career, you'll have about 2,600 skill points. Typically. This is also assuming you're using hammers, so silver hammers on your G1s, and having at least 3 gold hammers for your Twinkle Series Climax races. I don't believe she is going to race the America JCC here. It is an ideal race to run. It's a medium race, so you might as well just take it, especially when you're low energy like that. You're going to rest anyway. Might as well just race, get rid of the energy, and then rest. That would have been probably a better option. In this case too, like there's an energy event right after. You could even just race another turn, because I believe this race also has mediums. And I don't know if she's going to check the races. Yeah, Kyoto Kinen is, oh, it is the Tokyo Shimbun. That's on that turn. But yeah, so you can take that. The thing is, you want to basically maximize your sets. So I will suggest it again. I suggest checking Uma Guide. Know the sets that you want to run. If you want easy handed out sets, they do have schedules that are pre-made that kind of cover a majority of epithets to net you around like 300 stats. By this point in the career, everybody hold your horses. I'm going to say a controversial statement. By this point in the career, I don't know why she doesn't just skip those. It's the silliest thing. Okay. By this point in the career, like I was saying, I run a similar deck. Actually, it's a very similar deck. I will typically be at 700 speed, if not like 750, like getting close to 800, 700 speed, 700 stam, about 600 power, 400 or 500 guts, and like 600 wit by this point. The stat line here is what I would say is insanely behind for this point in the run. Part of that comes with running sets and being able to purchase items from the shop. Other things come from effective summer training, as we've seen, as well as just effectively managing energy. If you rest too much during the scenario, you are low-key cooking your runs. If you train too much during the scenario, you are low-key cooking your runs. Those are just the statements that I'm going to make. Some people can disagree with that. I'm sure some people have had insane runs where they scored pretty high and they trained and they only did like maybe 30 races at most. I would say 35's a minimum. You want to race as much as you can. I know I said I wasn't going to bring it up again. Bring up your aptitudes though. So the reason you want to do that is very plainly clear. I've seen some people do like 25 races and get like 10 wins. You really want to be able to race and win a lot. You don't want to lose races in this entire scenario. I recently just completed my Kita-san run for the upcoming CM because signups open today, the day that I'm recording this. And I managed to have a really, what I would consider pretty lucky run. I managed to get groundwork. I got long S. I got fast learner off the event, not through the shop. Not through the shop. You don't want to buy that through the shop. A pretty lucky run. And I hit a stat line of like 1200, I think 940, and then like 700 guts, and then like another 940 on wit. So that's pretty good. That's a UG run. I still think it could be improved. I still think it could be better. I feel like I should be able to hit 1000 power and 1000 wit, along with 1200 stam and 1200 speed, and like 600 or 700. Oh, 600 or 700 guts. So there's always more to improve. I think that was a decent run that I had, but that just goes to show by this point in that run that I did, I had that stat line that I mentioned. It was 700. It was pretty close to 800 for the speed, but 700, and then like 600, 500, 600. Anyway, what you just saw right there was the sets for completing that. So the more that you see Akikawa show up and give you stats, the more correct path that you're on. We've only seen her a couple times throughout this career. Remember, Queen Elizabeth doesn't really count for classics. This is really good speed training. If I was choosing to take the Victoria Mile over this, low-key, I'd be saying in my head, like, yo, you're fucking up. But, like, I would take this. This is beautiful. 85 raw. And then with freaking megaphone and weights, it's just much higher. Like, bro, it's what? 115 and 63. Like, that's pretty good. So, like, something like that's decent. That's a good training to skip a race. What else will happen throughout this run? Something that I will say, and we're kind of getting towards the end of this. I feel like I've spoken on most of the things that I think are really, really important. There are things that will pop up in your shop that I think are not worth buying. Or if you have the ability to buy them, I think it's an indicator that your run's not really going the way it should. One of those is the fast learner cap. Another one's the charming mirror. If you're able to buy that a significant portion into your run, or if you even need it a significant portion in your run, I would say that is probably a problem. Ideally, if you're going to get charming, you need to get it junior year. And it's really like a last resort purchase. You'd rather purchase your big three first. So remember your stats, your hammers, and then your energy items. And then like the other things as well. So weights, cupcakes, megaphones, those also take priority over buying things that are like practice perfect, charming, fast learner. Those conditions, if you can avoid buying them, like don't buy them. You also don't really want to buy training level ups if you can avoid it. So that means if you're in a situation where you have 250 shot points and you have, for example, no megaphones on you, no weights, your stats are kind of low, and megaphones, weights, and stat books show up in your shop, but you also get speed training level up. You should prioritize those other 3 first, then the speed training level up. That is just a side note. We haven't really seen something like that throughout this run. They do just pop up occasionally. But since it hadn't shown up, I felt like it would be a good time to mention it by this point. Ideally, you don't want to buy those. If you can buy those and it's not going to hurt your run, by all means, go ahead and buy it. I'd say like, I believe I bought a speed level up and a stam level up. No, I think I just bought only the stam level up actually during my Kitasan run. And it's because I had the extra, one, I had the extra turns. 2, I had already hit my stat line that I ideally wanted by that point. And so it made it very easy to just purchase that. Anyway, we are getting close towards the end of this run. I don't think she's going to run any extra races here. I am going to just skip ahead. We already talked about summer practices, so that means double megaphoning, using your weights, keeping your energy up if you can, and saving your energy items for summer. I don't think I mentioned that, but it should be a given. You want to save your energy items for summer. Okay, so she ended up with practice perfect. She's training, she's racing, training. No, not training. Racing again. Thought I skipped far enough to be on the training. It should be training or resting. You get energy back after this turn anyway, so I would just not rest. Okay, she rested. And, well, there is that. So, 976. Overall, in terms of fans, it's not, like, bad. So, she won a majority of her races. You can see that. I don't think she clocked as often as she probably could. We won't really know. And then by this point, you want to have 3 gold hammers for this. So she does have her 3 gold hammers. She didn't pop any of her stats, which I think is really interesting. I would also maybe check if I had a megaphone by this point. And she does. Oh my god, she's got a ton of megaphones. She kind of overbought on megaphones, and you should megaphone wit. You only have 3. Okay. You only have 3 turns left of training. You have 7 megaphones on you. This is going to sound like a math problem, but it's not. Use your megaphone. Please, guys, if you have the means to increase your training and you have good training, use the items. Don't be afraid to use them. There's nothing that's happening after this. She had no reason to save the megaphone. She could have just used it. Okay, so she's going to use the hammer. I understand saving the silver hammer up until this point. There are times where the end shop does not give you any golden hammers, and you're put in a spot where you kind of just need to take a hammer with you. Okay, so she's going to megaphone this turn, but look how many extra megaphones there are. There's so many. There's just so many. Okay, so surely she hammers and then she races. Okay. There's nothing in the shop. You should megaphone this turn. Okay, megaphone, and then she stammed weight. And that's all right. This stat line's not terrible. Bear in mind, the stat line's not terrible. This is going to score decently. I wouldn't say high. It's going to score decently. Simply because the stat line's not terrible. It's a decent stat line. It's low-key Unity stats, but like, it's a decent stat line. 992 skill points. That means you purchased some skills along the way, which is perfectly fine. You can buy skills to keep the run consistent. After all, you do have to race a lot. You might as well just try and win a lot. I wouldn't buy too many skills, of course, if you know that you're going to get hints. Avoid doing that. But otherwise, buying skills is fine. Then we get the end of the run here, and it's a 15.5. So that's significantly lower than I would have expected from the stat line. I think a 16 should have been on the table. But knowing that there weren't that many races, that means that there weren't a whole lot of skill points available. If I were to show this screenshot to someone from 4 months ago, right, they would think that this happened in Unity. Like it looks very similar to a Unity build. And that's not to roast the build, but it's to give you a concept of how much more these scenarios will scale up and how you need to use the scenario mechanics to your advantage in order to get stronger Umas. By all means, if this Jordan had Mile B and was able to run the rest of the sets and raced enough, I think that, you know, with certain practices, this could easily become an SS. It's not much of a question. The stat line should be possible to hit, where the wit is like 1k, the power is 1100, speeds 1200, stamps like 1k as well. It's possible, especially with this deck. It's just a matter of cleaning up certain practices. And that's essentially why I wanted to review this. It's not because I think that everybody sucks at the game. I think that people don't know what they don't know. So in order to further our knowledge and get to know what we should know in this game, I am going to recap a couple of important points. First of all, I will say again, check Uma Guide. I'll probably link it down below, either in the description or in the comments, or if I forget to do it in the comments, I'm sure somebody will. And if you haven't seen it, I'm pretty sure that the link is just uma.guide. I'm pretty sure it's just that. But to recap our important things, the career starts before you even push the start button. So make sure that you're able to bring your aptitudes up. I feel like long B would have been fine on this Uma, and opting for mile sparks only would have been great. I actually feel like that probably could have made the run beautiful. You don't run very many long races, and by the time that you do, like I was saying, you already know that you're able to buy skills and you know what your stat line is, and you can expect whether or not you're actually going to win that race. So bring your aptitudes up. Mile sparks, must have. Gold chip is mile C. Saiyan Sky is mile C. In order to train those Umas effectively in this scenario, you want to have mile sparks. Second, you need to know your sets. Once you have your mile sparks achieved, then you need to know which races you need to run. Uma Guide can help with this. I think there's also a scheduler that Void had put out, and I think he made a video for it recently. That is also helpful. And you can also just save your agendas in the game. Those are all options to do. Knowing your sets will increase your stat gain by so much that people just don't realize. You need to be racing somewhere between 35 to 45 races per Trackblazer / MANT career. If you're doing any less than that, you are hurting your runs. Secondly, or that was second. Third, sorry. Third, know your shop, like big three, right? You need to know what you're looking for in your shop. Energy items are a must buy. Stat items are a must buy, with the exception of the small notepads, the ones that give you +3. I don't think that those are very worth it. Cleat hammers, must buy. And then megaphones, weights, cupcakes, those take priority over status effects or training level ups. You want to have the ability to maximize and fully control your good trainings to turn them into great trainings. This is very important. It will determine how your runs turn out alongside racing, because that will determine how much money you have for your shop. Another thing is to remember the gameplay loop. Until you're fully comfortable with the scenario, I suggest doing what Charles had suggested in his, I think his first video on MANT for Global, which was to check your training, check your shop, check your races. Do it every time until you are fully comfortable with the scenario. Once you know when your races are, once you know what good training looks like, that's when you can start to do whatever you want. And lastly, I would say the biggest thing is to keep playing the scenario. If you keep these things in mind, right, it's a lot to balance at first. It's a lot to kind of work out. It might take you a minute. It'll take you a little bit of time before you're able to get what you need. Sometimes it takes a minute before you're even able to get all the cards that you need in order to effectively run this scenario. That is okay. It will take you a minute. Don't let everyone else's SS's and UGs and high scores prevent you from having fun in the scenario. I've seen very many people want to quit already because they're not getting the scores that they're seeing everyone else post. But understand that there's many things that affect your runs. RNG is one of those. RNG affects your entire account. Whether or not you have the cards or the sparks needed will determine how your run will go. If you're a new player, I would not expect to score super high immediately. But that also doesn't mean that you can just go, none of this is my fault and it's all RNG. We can't do that. We also have to take accountability for certain things, which means that if somebody tells you, hey, you're racing kind of low, what's your race bonus? What sets are you running? You can't get frustrated at them. They're only trying to help you. Try and listen and take the feedback. Okay, that's a very important thing. It's a very, very important thing. This community has a tendency to kind of do what I call is just dodging accountability. There are people who have pulled improperly, have not brought up their parents in the way that they should, despite warnings many months in advance. You cannot complain in this scenario if you ignored things like the Kita banner, or you didn't save up 60k knowing that NTR was coming and that might save you if you don't have Kita. You can't really complain in those scenarios. I'm going to be honest, that situation's not really going to help you. If anything, it's going to make people really frustrated with you and not want to help you. That being said, with all of that in mind, take your time with the scenario. If you're even behind and you've been playing since day one, that's okay. You can catch up at some point. It might not be tomorrow. It might not be today. It might not be next week. But, we have a few months that we're stuck with the scenario. You might as well just take your time with it. Plan your pulls accordingly and just see what you can do. It's more important that I think that it's more important that people have fun with this game. In this scenario, it is one of the most flexible and strongest scenarios that we've had on global to this day. Grand Live is not going to be one where you're afforded much flexibility and customization with your stats. It is a fun scenario, I will say. It's a lot of people will think Grand Live's a lot more fun than MANT. But that being said, MANT is one of those scenarios where you're given essentially full control over your run. You can fully kind of sway how your stats are going to look by the end of it. And RNG is a big factor in this scenario. Just try not to let it frustrate you. Like have as much fun with this as possible. Learn the scenario. Take the time to figure out what is going on with the scenario, how the race bonuses works, how the sets work, what optional sets you have available to you, how to kind of gamify the shop in a way, what to expect when you're doing certain things, racing certain turns, training on certain turns. Once you have those things also figured out, the scenario will become a lot clearer than it has been for some other people. So take your time, enjoy it. We're stuck with it. So all that being said, that is my kind of analysis and pointing out of certain mistakes that people may or may not be making. This video is very long. It's not one that I'm going to really cut up and edit that much like I have for some of my other videos, because I don't want to leave anything out and I don't really want to scrub through this. So that being said, I appreciate you guys if you've watched this far in. This is like almost an hour and a half long, so I do appreciate it. And then just a reminder, we are still doing that giveaway for the anniversary tickets for Umamusume Global. That means that, we're giving away 10 of them. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. We're giving away 10 of those tickets. So you guys have a solid chance of winning. So go ahead and hop in the Discord. For those of you who are channel members of mine, I will have a more in-depth video for how I do my runs personally and how I run specific Umas, because I think that that is something that is worth showcasing to you guys. I really want to show the people who support me a way that I can support them back and show them how someone who is a little bit more well versed with the game, well equipped, will play the scenario. That being said, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Join the Discord, hop into the giveaway, subscribe to the channel. I love you. Good night or good morning or something. Stop making mistakes. And actually, join the Discord. Show me more mistakes that you guys might be making, and I'll make another video. Anyway, see you guys.